the Acropolis of Athens, Greece, high above the bustling city of Athens. On a rocky limestone plateau that rises almost 150 meters above the surrounding landscape, stands one of the most iconic monuments of human civilization, the Acropolis. The word Acropolis simply means high city, but in Athens it has come to mean far more than just geography. It is a symbol of democracy, of philosophy, of human creativity, and of resilience. For nearly 3,000 years, this sacred hill has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the flowering of Greek art and philosophy, the fires of war and destruction, and the constant rebirth of a city that gave the world some of its most enduring ideas. To look upon the Acropolis today is not just to see stone, marble, and ruins, but to gaze into the very soul of Western civilization. The story of the Acropolis begins deep in prehistory. Long before the gleaming marble temples we see today, this hill was already a place of settlement, of refuge, and of worship. Archaeologists have found traces of habitation here dating back to the Neolithic period. Around 4000 to 3000 BCE in the Mycenaean era. Around the second millennium BCE, the Acropolis became a fortified citadel. At its highest point stood a palace complex, complete with massive stone walls known as Cyclopean walls, so named because later Greeks believed only the mythical giants, the Cyclopes, could have built them. Within these walls, kings ruled people, worshipped their gods, and the Acropolis served as both sanctuary and fortress, a place of safety in times of war. As centuries passed and Greek culture evolved, so too did the Acropolis. By the 8th century BCE, in the age of Homer, the Acropolis was no longer just a fortress, but increasingly a sacred space, dedicated above all to Athena, the goddess of wisdom, war, and the patron deity of Athens. Festivals in her honor, such as the Panathenaic festival, drew people to the Acropolis, where offerings, sacrifices, and processions celebrated the goddess who symbolized the spirit of the city. Temples began to rise upon the hill, built first in humble stone and wood, then in more enduring marble, marking the Acropolis as a religious center of growing importance. But it was in the 5th century BCE, during what we call the Golden Age of Athens, that the Acropolis reached its pinnacle. This was the age of Pericles, the great statesman who led Athens after the Persian Wars, when the city, flush with confidence and wealth, sought to express its power and ideals through art and architecture. The Persians had invaded Greece earlier in the century and, in 480 BCE, they sacked Athens, burning the temples of the Acropolis to the ground. Rather than despair, the Athenians saw this destruction as an opportunity for rebirth. Under Pericles' vision, and with the genius of architects and sculptors like Ictinus, Callicrates, and Phidias, the Acropolis was rebuilt on a scale never before seen. The centerpiece of this grand rebuilding was the Parthenon, a temple dedicated to Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin, completed between 447 and 432 BCE. The Parthenon is perhaps the most perfect expression of classical Greek architecture. Constructed entirely of Pentelic marble, its proportions follow precise mathematical ratios that create an illusion of harmony and balance. The columns lean inward ever so slightly, the steps curve gently, the corners rise subtly higher than the center, all designed so that the temple appears absolutely straight and flawless to the human eye. Inside stood Phidias's colossal statue of Athena, over 12 meters tall, made of gold and ivory, radiating the city's devotion to its patron goddess. The Parthenon's sculpted friezes and pediments told stories of gods, heroes, and mythological battles, celebrating both Athens, divine protectress, and the civic pride of its citizens. Surrounding the Parthenon were other masterpieces. To the north, the Erechtheion, an unusual temple built between 421 and 406 BCE, honored both Athena and Poseidon, reflecting an ancient myth in which the two deities competed for the patronage of Athens. The Erechtheion is famous for its caryatides, 6 graceful female figures who serve as columns supporting the southern porch. To the west stood the Propyla, the monumental gateway to the Acropolis, designed by the architect Mythocles. This grand entrance gave visitors the sense of entering a sacred precinct. Nearby was the small but elegant Temple of Athena Nike, celebrating the goddess in her aspect as bringer of victory. Built to commemorate Athens' triumphs over the Persians. Together, these buildings formed a harmonious ensemble, a visual expression of Athenian power, piety, and artistic genius. Yet the Acropolis was not just stone. It was alive with people, rituals, and festivals. Every 4 years, the Panathenaic procession wound its way from the city below to the Acropolis, carrying a new robe woven by Athenian women to drape over the ancient wooden statue of Athena housed in the Erechtheion. Citizens, priests, musicians, dancers, and athletes all took part in this civic-religious celebration, reinforcing the unity of the polis and the bond between the people and their goddess. Philosophers like Socrates and Plato walked the streets of Athens beneath the Acropolis, their ideas shaping the intellectual heritage of humanity. But history is rarely kind to monuments, no matter how glorious. Over the centuries, the Acropolis endured countless transformations. After the decline of Athens and the rise of Macedon under Alexander the Great, then the conquests of Rome, the Parthenon continued to stand, admired even by conquerors. The Romans preserved and even repaired the temples, seeing themselves as heirs of Greek culture. But with the rise of Christianity in the 4th century CE, the old pagan temples were repurposed. The Parthenon was converted into a Christian church dedicated to the Virgin Mary, its pagan sculptures defaced or removed. The Erechtheion and other temples were likewise adapted for Christian use. In the medieval period, as Athens passed into Byzantine, then Frankish, and eventually Ottoman hands, the Acropolis continued to transform. Under the Ottomans, the Parthenon became a mosque, complete with a minaret. In 1687, during a war between the Venetians and the Ottomans, tragedy struck. The Ottomans had stored gunpowder inside the Parthenon, and when Venetian cannon fire hit, the building exploded, blowing apart its roof and many of its columns. What had survived nearly 2,000 years of history was reduced to a ruin in a single moment of war. Marble blocks tumbled down the slopes of the Acropolis, statues shattered, and the once perfect temple became the broken skeleton we see today. In the early 19th century, further loss came with the actions of Lord Elgin, the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, who removed many of the Parthenon's surviving sculptures, transporting them to London, where they remain in the British Museum. These Elgin marbles, as they are called, are still the subject of heated debate, with Greece demanding their return as part of its cultural heritage. Despite centuries of destruction and neglect, the Acropolis never lost its symbolic power. During the Greek War of Independence in the 1820s, the Acropolis became both a battlefield and a beacon of national identity. When the modern Greek state was founded, the Acropolis was cleared of many later additions, such as Ottoman houses and Byzantine churches, in an attempt to restore its classical appearance. In the 20th and 21st centuries, extensive restoration efforts have sought to stabilize the crumbling ruins, using both ancient marble and new techniques to preserve the monuments for future generations. Today, the Acropolis is more than just a collection of ruins. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most visited archaeological sites in the world, drawing millions of visitors each year who climb the rocky steps, pass through the propylaea, and gaze in awe at the Parthenon. For Greeks, the Acropolis remains a symbol of their national identity, their resilience, and their contribution to world culture. For the world, it stands as a reminder of the ideals of democracy, philosophy, and artistic excellence that continue to shape human thought. To stand on the Acropolis is to be surrounded by layers of history, the distant echoes of Mycenaean kings, the triumphant voices of Athenian citizens in the age of Pericles, the prayers of Christian monks, the calls to prayer of Ottoman imams, the thunder of cannons, and the voices of modern tourists marveling at the ruins. It is a place where past and present meet, where myth and history intertwine, and where the stones themselves seem to speak of endurance. The Acropolis is not just Athens' high city, it is humanity's high point, a monument to what we can achieve when art, faith, and civic pride come together. And though it may stand today in ruin, its broken columns and weathered statues continue to inspire, reminding us that beauty and ideas can outlast empires, and that even in fragments, the legacy of Athens shines as brightly as ever. Deeper mythological connections: Athena versus Poseidon, Greek legends tied to the Acropolis, rich daily life imagery of ancient Athens at the foot of the Acropolis, philosophy and democracy context: Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and their ties to the site. Later history: Byzantine, Crusader, Ottoman, Venetian periods in greater detail. Modern struggles and preservation with more narrative depth. Poetic ending: reflection, tying it to humanity's story. The Acropolis is more than stone, more than marble. It is a stage where gods and mortals, myths and realities, all converged. To truly grasp its meaning, we must step back into the world of legend. According to ancient myth, Athens was once a nameless city. The gods Poseidon, lord of the sea, and Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, both desired to be its patron. To settle the dispute, each offered a gift. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, and from the earth sprang a saltwater spring, symbolizing naval power. Athena, by contrast, planted the olive tree, a symbol of peace, prosperity, and sustenance. The citizens chose Athena's gift, and so the city took her name. To this day, an olive tree grows beside the Erechtheion, said to be a descendant of Athena's first sacred tree, reminding visitors of the goddess's enduring gift to humanity. This myth was not just a story, it was a declaration of values. Athens chose not the might of the sea, but the wisdom of cultivation, not brute force, but balance and prosperity. The Acropolis thus became more than a temple platform. It became the embodiment of Athenian identity. But the Acropolis was not isolated from the life of the city below. The agora at the foot of the hill buzzed with merchants, philosophers, and politicians. Imagine the sounds, the cries of traders selling olive oil and pottery, the debates of citizens discussing laws, the laughter of children chasing each other in the streets. From the agora, one could always look up and see the shining marble of the Acropolis, a constant reminder of the gods above and the ideals of the polis. For Athenians, daily life was intertwined with the sacred hill. Their democracy, their commerce, Their festivals all found their anchor in the Acropolis's shadow. Philosophers often walked here. Socrates questioned Athenians in the streets beneath. The Acropolis, his words echoing against its stones. Plato envisioned his ideal forms in its presence, while Aristotle studied the constitutions of states under its gaze. The Acropolis was not merely a backdrop, it was the silent witness to the birth of philosophy, democracy, and rational thought. As centuries rolled on, the Acropolis adapted, reflecting the changing tides of history. When Christianity became the dominant faith of the Roman Empire, the Parthenon's pagan altars were dismantled, replaced by Christian iconography. For nearly 1,000 years, it served as a great church, the Church of the Virgin Mary, one of the most important Christian sanctuaries in Byzantine Athens. Imagine the sound of hymns, the glow of candles, the scent of incense, rising where once sacrifices had been offered to Athena. Marble statues of gods were toppled or hidden, mosaics and frescoes took their place, and yet the sacred hill remained central to spiritual life. When crusaders swept through Greece in the 13th century, the Acropolis became a fortified castle. Under the rule of Frankish dukes, towers and walls were added, the sacred transformed into the strategic. Then, in 1458, the Ottomans captured Athens. For them, the Parthenon became a mosque, with a minaret rising proudly beside it. For over 2 centuries, the call to prayer echoed across the same stones where once Athenians had prayed to Athena. Then came 1687, one of the darkest moments in the Acropolis's history. During the Venetian siege of Athens, the Ottomans used the Parthenon as a gunpowder store. A Venetian shell struck the building, igniting a catastrophic explosion. The blast tore through the temple, collapsing its roof, shattering columns, and scattering fragments of marble across the hill. In a single moment, one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements was reduced to ruin. Eyewitnesses wrote of the horror of statues crumbling, of fire consuming what had endured for nearly 2 millennia. Even in ruin, the Acropolis retained its allure. In the 18th and 19th centuries, European travelers, artists, and poets, inspired by Romanticism, saw the Acropolis as a symbol of a lost golden age. Lord Byron, the great poet, wrote of its beauty and lamented its destruction, pledging himself to the Greek struggle for independence. But admiration also brought plunder. Thomas Bruce, the Earl of Elgin, removed many of the surviving sculptures, shipping them to Britain. These works, known today as the Elgin Marbles, remain in the British Museum, sparking one of the most heated debates in the world of cultural heritage. For Greeks, their absence is a wound. For others, they are treasures of world culture preserved. Abroad with the Greek War of Independence in the early 19th century, the Acropolis once again became a battlefield. When Greece won its freedom, the Acropolis became a national symbol, its ruins standing as both scars of oppression and emblems of rebirth. Restoration began slowly, as archaeologists and architects sought to rescue what remained. Ottoman houses and Byzantine churches that had crowded the hill were removed in an attempt to peel back the layers of history and reveal the classical heart of the Acropolis. In the 20th century, Greece undertook systematic restoration projects, some flawed, others groundbreaking. Iron clamps once inserted into the marble rusted, causing more damage, but in recent decades, careful and scientific restorations have used titanium supports and precise reconstructions to stabilize the monuments. Blocks of fallen marble have been painstakingly reassembled, columns raised again, fragments reunited after centuries apart. The Acropolis Restoration Project, ongoing since the 1970s, is one of the most ambitious conservation efforts in the world, ensuring that future generations may still walk among these stones. Today, visitors climb the same pathways once used by ancient Athenians, passing through the propyla into a world that feels both eternal and fragile. They marvel at the Parthenons, columns glowing in the sunlight, at the caryatides of the Erechtheion, gazing silently across the city, at the sweeping views of Athens below. Each stone speaks of resilience, of destruction and rebirth, of human ambition and divine inspiration. But the Acropolis is not just a relic of the past, it is a living symbol. In times of national crisis, Greeks have looked to it as a source of unity. In World War II, when Nazi flags flew over the Acropolis, Greek resistance fighters risked their lives to tear them down, restoring their nation's dignity. In modern Athens, the Acropolis shines each night, illuminated against the sky, a beacon, not only for Greeks but for the world. The Acropolis teaches us that civilizations rise and fall, that monuments may crumble, but ideas endure. The ideals born in its shadow, democracy, philosophy, the pursuit of beauty, continue to shape our world. As you stand there, beneath the marble columns and weathered stones, you are reminded that you are part of this continuum, a witness to history's grand stage. The Acropolis is not merely Athens' crown jewel, it is humanity's eternal flame. Its ruins whisper not of loss, but of resilience, of the power of culture and ideas to transcend time. And though the Parthenon may stand broken, its beauty, its meaning, and its spirit remain whole, inspiring us still, thousands of years after its birth.